Time now is 10:10, and this is the board meeting of California Architects Board, and I'm Tian Feng, the president of the board. I would ask Secretary Gladstone to call the roll to start our meeting.
Thank you. Tian Feng?
Yeah.
Brett Gladstone here. Mitra Kanani?
Here.
Sylvia Kwan? Absent. Ebony Lewis? Absent, I believe. Ebony Lewis? Okay. Ron Jones?
Here.
Ron Jones here. Robert Perlman?
Present.
Present. Nilza Serrano? Not here. Sunny Ward?
Present.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum.
Okay, so we have a 6-member from quorum, and we will continue to our next agenda, which is I give some procedural remark. And this meeting is webcasted and with 2 live locations. One is here in the DCA's headquarters, another one's in Southern California, and both are accessible by public. And I want to welcome some other members and also public members here or remote to attending this meeting, and including our own Landscape Architects Committee. John is here as well. So again, always remind you all motions need to be seconded, and we need a roll call to vote on all the agenda items. At this moment, if any public members has any general comments not specific to or specific to agenda items want to speak now, you have that opportunity. I would suggest in-room public members first, then we will let a moderator decide public members from remote locations and public members log in through virtual meetings. So with that said, any comments before we even start the meeting from the room? Any public comment? I hear none. And the moderator, you may want to see if we have online virtual public member want.
This is the moderator.
And a remote location, see if there are any public members there.
We are now looking for public comments from our Southern California office. If you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand, and you will be called on by the board member at that location.
So I guess we're here now and would like to move to the next agenda item. Is that okay, moderator?
Hold on one moment, please. Can we stay on this agenda item, please? Looking for Sunny or looking for Robert to indicate whether they have any requests from Southern California, or if
we are here and we do have a public member, but they have declined public comment at this time, and we'll wait until the appropriate agenda item that they came for.
Wonderful. On each agenda item, just let us know that they do not wish to comment.
We'll do.
In the meantime, via Webex, we are accepting public comments via Webex, and we have a request from Mark Christensen, AIA California. Bear with us just a moment. I will send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Can you turn up the volume a little bit too?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Members, Mark Christian with the American Institute of Architects, California. We look forward to participating in today's meeting. There are several items that we hope to have a thorough conversation, a respectful conversation to try to find possible solutions where differences exist, particularly items J, L, and N on the agenda. There are licensees at both locations, I believe in Sacramento and West Hollywood, that are here to help the board understand these issues, have a understanding of how the licensed population is viewing them. And again, we look forward to having a polite, respectful, and thorough conversation of these issues when these items are brought up. Thank you very much.
All right, and our next request for comment comes from John West. I'll let you say your name. Hold on, John. Bear with me just a moment. Sent you a request to unmute your microphone. All right, John, I see that you're unmuted.
Yes, John Roshinsky, current chair of the Landscape Architect Technical Committee. I just wanted to thank everybody for allowing me to participate in the meeting today. Unfortunately, I came on a little bit late, so I'm assuming that we have not actually started on any of the agenda items other than the beginning of the meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. I do have one comment that I will be making on the minutes, but I will wait until that time to do so.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And those are all the requests from Webex, Mr. President.
Moderator, do we have any more requests?
Those are all the requests from Webex, Mr. President.
Thank you. So next agenda item is agenda item C, and we will receive update from Department of Consumer Affairs. And Brianna, are you? Hi. Well, representing the department, provide us with the update. Thank you, Brianna.
That's why I don't work in IT. Okay, well, good morning, board members. I'm Brianna Miller with the Department of Consumer Affairs, Board and Bureau Relations. Thank you for allowing me an opportunity to provide a department update to your board today. I'd like to start my update with a note about the transition back to in-person meetings. On April 1st, boards and bureaus returned to meeting in accordance with all aspects of the Open Meeting Act, including publicly noticing all meeting locations. There is legislation, AB 1733, which would permanently allow boards and committees to meet remotely while also providing both virtual and physical options for members of the public to participate. Unfortunately, this bill was not heard in policy committee before the deadline, therefore it will not move forward this year. If your board took a position or is planning to take a position on this legislation, it may still be helpful to share this information with the authors and the committees. Please be sure to send a copy of your position letter to Jennifer Simoes, who's Deputy Director of Legislation, so that she can facilitate this communication. And with the recent increase in COVID-19 cases, DCA would like to remind your board of efforts you can take to combat the spread of COVID-19 now that we have returned to in-person meetings. In April, Board and Bureau Relations distributed to all board and committee members guidelines and requirements when conducting in-person meetings. In sum, this communication addresses adherence to local public health guidelines at a meeting location, face coverings, and vaccination verification and testing. DCA has also shared guidance and tips from California Health and Human Services Agency to reduce the spread of COVID-19 for in-person meetings. If you have not done so already, I encourage you all to review these documents, and I'm happy to provide it to your board once more, as this did go out in April. Additionally, the California Department of Public Health strongly recommends that individuals continue to mask in indoor settings. DCA has also shared signage, which you can post at your meetings to notify attendees of this face covering recommendation. And as you prepare for upcoming meetings, please be aware of changing public health guidance, and remember that as state representatives, we are all expected to adhere to state and local orders concerning our duties. Next, a note about DCA's open meeting survey. DCA will be collecting surveys until further notice to capture and track the costs and attendance for all meetings since April 1st, when all aspects of the Open Meeting Act resumed, to demonstrate the benefits of conducting remote meetings as allowed under the prior executive order. We have distributed to all board and bureau leadership a request that staff complete the survey 30 days after each meeting held. And should you have any questions, please reach out to Board and Bureau Relations. Next, I'm pleased to announce the release of the DCA Enlightened Licensing Report. This inaugural report of the Enlightened Licensing Project is now available and was distributed to all boards and bureaus on Friday, May 13th. Additionally, Board and Bureau Relations hosted a brown bag meeting with department staff on June 1st to detail all project recommendations. This innovative and collaborative project, which was conducted in partnership with the Board of Registered Nursing, was started to streamline and enhance licensing processes by utilizing the knowledge and expertise of subject matter experts within DCA's boards and bureaus. After a thorough assessment of the BRN's licensing processes, the project's co-chairs provided recommendations to introduce new ideas and implement best practices for critical licensing activities in the areas of application processing, application by examination, application by endorsement or fingerprints, and the overall structure and accountability improvement. DCA hopes that all boards and bureaus can learn from this report and implement recommendations where applicable. Next, a note about appointments and recruitment. Whether you're meeting remote or in person, DCA wants to help keep your board fully seated with excellent members and diverse voices. Currently, the board has one vacant position, a public position appointed by the Speaker of the Assembly. Additionally, the board has a couple members nearing their grace period, so please know that Board and Bureau Relations is here to assist with the appointment and reappointment process. And likewise, DCA's communications team recently released a new communications toolkit to assist boards with member recruitment, and it's available in multiple languages. Individuals who are interested in appointment can also visit the board member resources page found on DCA's website to apply for an appointment. Next, a quick reminder that the board member orientation training is June 15th. Board members who are recently appointed or reappointed need to attend the board member orientation training, or BMOT, within a year of that appointment date. Likewise, this training is available to any board member who's interested in a refresher. You can register for the live virtual training through the Learning Management System, or LMS, which is DCA's training portal. And finally, a note about Board and Bureau Relations departures. I'd like to notify you all of some changes in Board and Bureau Relations. First, Carrie Holmes, Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations, has left the department. Her last day was May 13th. And with mixed emotions, I'd like to share that my last day with DCA is this Friday, June 10th, as I have accepted a position with another state agency. DCA has been my home for many years and provided me so many great opportunities, including to meet and form relationships with wonderful folks as yourselves. And I will thoroughly miss DCA, and I'm grateful to everyone who has made it a great home for me for the past several years. Please rest assured that during this transitional period, DCA Executive Office and Board and Bureau Relations will continue to ensure continuity of services to all of our boards and bureaus. And that concludes my update. So as always, Board and Bureau Relations is here to help your board, and if there's anything we can do to assist you, please do not hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brianna. Any comments from our fellow board members?
I have a question. Ms. Miller, you mentioned the legislation that would amend the Open Meetings Act that wasn't heard in time to be heard this session or this year at the legislature, and that our board has a opportunity to weigh in with an opinion on that. Would we be doing that, you know, at a meeting such as this or today's meeting, or should we agendize that? Laura, staff, is she on?
Okay, how's that? Okay.
Yeah.
It is on the agenda for today. The board did send a support letter to the legislature because the president authorized me to send the letter. The bill is an urgency bill, so it is possible, although not likely, that it could still make it through the legislative process. It's exempt from the deadline because of the urgency clause. So the department and the agency have sent a letter to the committee as well, urging support for it, and a lot of the boards have weighed in. So if we hear anything further, I will let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that said, I like open to for public to comment. Let's start with here in the room. Anyone has a comment, you can just start speak or raise your hand. And I don't see any. Moderator, we may want to go to the remote location and then virtual attendees.
This is the moderator. Do we have any requests from Southern California?
No request from Southern California.
Thank you very much. We are now accepting public comment via Webex. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. If you are a dial-in user or unable to see the Q&A box, please raise your hand. We will call on people in the order we have requests, and you will have 2 minutes to speak with a 15-second warning. Our first request comes from John. Bear with us just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
This is John. I'm sorry, I may have jumped in prematurely. This is not commenting on the meeting minutes at this time, correct?
Correct, is not.
Okay. I'm going to lower my hand and I'll wait again.
And that was our only request for public comment, Mr. President.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you again, Brianna, and always nice to see you come back, and we'll see you next meeting, okay? Thank you. Okay, we are moving to Agenda D. Any public comment that is not relates to the agenda has a general comments. That's the opportunity for you to speak up. And again, we start with in-room attendees. Anyone wish to speak on any matters about the board? I don't see raise the hand. So moderator, we can go to remote location and then virtual attendees.
We are accepting public comment for items not on the agenda. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the, I'm on autopilot, bear with me. Southern California, do you have any requests for public comment?
We don't have a request for comment, but we also just want to point out that we think we've already done this and we just did it out of order from DCA.
All right. Thank you very much. Moving on to public comments via Webex. We are accepting public comments. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing none, would you like to return to the agenda, Mr. President?
Yes, please, moderator. So we are now on Agenda E, review and possible actions for the last board meeting minutes. Any member is ready to make a motion to comment or to approve the meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have Mr. Gladstone and Mr. Jones moved and a second. Any members wish to speak before I open to public? Okay, so we are going to open for public comments for this agenda, which is the board meeting minutes of last meeting, and start with in-room attendees. Anyone wish to speak? I see no hands. Moderator, you may open to remote location and virtual attendees.
We're now accepting public comment from the remote location in Southern California.
No comment here.
Wonderful. We are now accepting public comment on the meeting minutes via Webex. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. You'll be given 2 minutes to speak with a 15-second warning. And our first request comes from John. Bear with us just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
All right, thank you. I have one recommended change, and it is on item K2I, discuss and possible action on California Code of Regulations, section 2615 and 2620. In the second paragraph, the second line at the end, the word uniformed should be changed simply to uniform. And that is my only comment.
Thank you for your comment, Ron. Sorry, John.
Mhm.
Seeing no other requests for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, we are returning to our agenda about board meeting minutes of last board meeting, February 18, and we will accept with minor correction of spelling.
So, Mr. President, we do have that motion already on the floor. I think we can amend the motion to include that comment, if that's okay with the maker of the motion and the seconder of the motion. And I'll just ask if there's anyone that would object to that. Any other member would object to that.
Are you okay with?
Hearing none, we can add that to the motion.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Council, we can vote?
We don't need to vote on this. We don't need to vote.
We don't, do we?
You accepted the
We
motion.
do.
We do need to vote.
Okay. All right. We ask Secretary Gladstone to do the roll call on voting.
Okay, so we're amending the motion to correct the language that a member of the public pointed out, and I'm calling the roll for that. Kim Feng?
Aye.
Brett Gladstone, aye. Mitra Karnani?
Aye.
Sylvia Kwan is not here. Ron Jones?
Aye.
Robert Pearman?
Aye.
Nilza Serrano is not here, and Sunny Ward.
Aye.
Okay. That carries.
Okay. Very good. Motion passes. We are now moving to the next agenda, Agenda F, which we will invite our Executive Director, Laura Zuniga, will provide overview on the legislation. May or may not require any actions, but let's hear from Laura first, see if we need a discussion and actions. Okay?
Thank you. Okay, starts on page 25 of your packet. The first bill is AB 225 by Assemblymember Gray. Existing law allows spouses of military members to get a temporary license. So this extends that temporary licensure authority to veterans within 6 months of their separation of duty. So this bill has passed the Assembly and it's currently awaiting hearing in the Senate Policy Committee, I believe Senate Business and Professions. Are there any questions on this item? The next one is AB 646 by Assemblymember Lowe. This bill also has passed the Assembly and is awaiting hearing in the Senate. This requires a board that has on its online license search system, if it displays that a person's license was revoked because of a conviction of a crime, if that person then sends the board a copy of an expungement order, if they expunge their conviction, the board then needs to pull down that online posting. Are there any questions on this bill? AB 1662 by Assemblymember Gibson. This bill requires a board to establish a process by which prospective applicants can request a pre-application determination as to whether their criminal history could be cause for denial of their application for licensure at a later date. So under existing law, the existing process, if someone applies for licensure with our board, they have to submit to a background check. And when we receive the results of that background check, the board has the ability to deny the license application if they have a substantially related conviction. There are kind of parameters as to what convictions we can consider, how old the conviction can be. But this bill sets up a new process where someone is asking in advance of applying whether or not they might be disqualified from licensure. So this bill has also passed the Assembly, is in the Senate Policy Committee and Senate Business and Professions Committee. On a practical level, I'm not quite sure how it would work in the sense that because there are parameters on how long we can consider a conviction for the most part. If someone applies, if they ask for a pre-application determination, by the time they actually apply, they may get a different answer in terms of if not enough time has passed when they do a pre-application determination, but 2 years later, maybe enough time has passed that we wouldn't consider it. You know, so they're just kind of practical things we would have to work out. But it's a new way to address kind of the issue of criminal convictions.
What was the purpose of the legislature in doing that? It's sort of a early testing of the waters?
I think so. I think that they feel like it may be more in some professions than others, but people who undergo training, particularly you know, for professions that might require vocational training or something, if they do all that and they undergo that training and that expense, and yet then they can't qualify for licensure, you know, they would like people to know up front. So,
okay,
so I
thank you.
That
yeah.
So I don't know, we don't get a lot of convictions returned for our applicants. I'm not sure it will have a substantial impact on our particular board. Any other questions? AB 1733 is the bill that Brianna mentioned in the DCA update. So this is the one that it would allow boards to continue to meet remotely as we had been doing. The bill hasn't moved yet. It was referred to Policy Committee, and it hasn't had a hearing yet. So there's still the potential, but the board did send a support letter. Many of the boards have weighed in support. The next bill is SB 1237 by Senator Newman. Under existing law, active duty licensees can qualify for a fee waiver from their renewal fee. This just makes a change to the definition of active duty to make it a little bit more broad. Again, this isn't one that would have a significant impact on our board. SB 1443 by Senator Roth. This bill is also passed the Senate and is in the Assembly for hearing. This bill extends the board's sunset date for 1 year. So we have it extends our sunset date for an additional year. And so otherwise we would have been up for sunset early next year. So we have an additional year. And then finally, I'm sorry, I think I might have missed one. So SB 1214 by Senator Jones. This bill requires a local planning agency to ensure that architectural drawings that contain protected information are made available to the public in a manner that does not facilitate their copying. So it helps protect their copyright protection.
I have a question about that.
Okay. And this provision, I believe, is sponsored by AIA California, and I know Mark is on the line. He might be able to address if there's more specific questions.
Well, I just want to point out it also states that architects can provide a summary or a short version of their plans and make that available to the public without going through the process of getting the ownership of the plans, which is the architect and the property owner's permission. I know in San Francisco, we regularly need copies of plans because the building department won't look at the microfiche on its own, even though it has access, and it can take 3 to 4 months to get copies because they have to send out a letter to the architect of record who may not be alive anymore and wait 90 days for that person not to respond, and then also get an affidavit under penalty of perjury from a property owner, and that's a very tiresome process. So, you know, I'm pleased to hear that this allows people to put together a shortened version of the plans and make it immediately available.
Okay, great. That's good. Thank you. Are there any other comments on this? Okay. So our last item is SB 1237 by Senator Newman. Bear with me 1 second. I accidentally closed that one.
I think you covered.
I did cover that one, right?
Yeah.
So sorry. So I think that is the last item. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think we want open to the public members again for comments. Any members in the room would like to speak on this or any particular items? I see now, and the moderator, we can now open to remote location and virtual attendees.
We are now looking for public comments from Southern California on agenda item F.
We have no public comments here.
Wonderful. We are now accepting public comment via Webex for agenda item F. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users may dial *3 to raise their hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. You'll be given 2 minutes to speak, and I'd like to correct myself and say you'll have a 30-second warning. Our first request comes from Mark Christian, AIA, California. Bear with me just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Mark Christian with the American Institute of Architects, California. If I just may quickly address what board member Gladstone, I believe it was Mr. Gladstone's comment on SB 1214. And Mr. Gladstone, I can talk with you offline on another day. Our bill does not affect health and safety code. Therefore, the building departments, the plans held by the building departments, we are in government code affecting planning departments. So there may be an issue that is outstanding on the plans of record being held by building departments. We can certainly talk with you on how to, any ideas on how to speed up the process to release those. Our bill does not deal with those. And happy to talk with you later this week, next week on that at your convenience. Thank you.
May I respond? Yes, I'd appreciate a chance to talk to you about how that may be extended to the building departments. Thanks for pointing out it just covers the planning departments at the moment.
And that was our only request for public comment via Webex at the moment.
Okay. So with that, we can move to the next agenda item, which is G, updated discussion of NCOG-related affairs. Why not? Let's ask Laura Zuniga to present this item. We can skip. So the only item for update would be
How's that? Okay, sorry. So, yeah, we pulled the other NCARB items since their annual meeting was last week, but we do have a general standing item on NCARB committee meetings. There haven't been any, I don't think, maybe since our last meeting. But so the new president of NCARB appointed new committees. So if any members are on any committees, if you want to let me know, I can just keep a list of service. I'm serving on the exam committee. I know that Nielsa is on the diversity committee, which was recently made into a committee. And Tiana, I believe you have some service as well. So that's it for this item.
Okay. We can turn to public comment period. Any members in the room would wish to speak? I see none. Moderator, we can open to remote location and virtual attendees.
We are now looking for public comment from the remote location in Southern California. I see shaking heads no. Can you please verbalize that?
No comments.
Wonderful, thank you. We are now accepting public comment via Webex. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment via Webex, do you wish to return to the agenda, Mr. President?
Yes, please, moderator. So now we are moving to agenda item H, updates on our board's committees. On March 30th this year, Professional Qualification Committee met and have good discussions on various items. I would like to ask the chair, committee chair, Sunny Wood, to provide a summary.
Good morning, everyone. I'll try to give a brief recount. I was just going through our minutes a few minutes ago. The focus of our meeting, although we talked about continuing education units for, I apologize. I'm the two agenda items that we talked about in a minor way, I'm at a blank for because the focus of our meeting was on SB 1010, and the board had sort of charged our committee with sort of approving or making a recommendation to the board today for a definition for zero net carbon design to respond to SB 1010 and our mission to implement the requirements for that. Staff proposed a recommendation, which we discussed. I was encouraged as well, I think, Tian, by the initial discussion regarding that definition. And again, I don't have it memorized, so I don't know if there's a possibility that it could, I don't know that now's the time to put it up because I think we're going to talk about this later and I can talk about it more in depth. But we discussed that definition. There were some concerns about it. We were encouraged that at the same time, the definition did, according to legal, seem to be broad enough to encompass some of the concerns of the board that we had discussed in previous category 2 of strategic plan and previous board meetings on issues dealing with climate change. So that had been a sort of concern of the board, and we confirmed in the committee meeting that the staff recommended definition did indeed, was indeed broad enough to both support the charge of SB 1010, but also encompass the items in category 2 that we all cared about so much, while also fulfilling the requirements of the law. There were some very specific questions that I think that are going to be on the agenda today to discuss when we get to that specific item. So I think I'll save it until then if everyone is comfortable with that.
Thank you, Sunny. This is a good summary. And we also talk about during that meeting, the committee will put further effort on reviewing the current degree educational equivalencies of qualifying for our candidates for licensing, and which is the evaluation of degrees accepted as education or in lieu of experience. It's an important document, and the committee start reviewing it and requested to continue our work on that regulation. So, with that said, do we have other committees?
I want to just point out one. I'm glad you reminded me of that, Tian. And there's one important thing. We did make it through the list of credit towards licensure for various education, and we are going to pick that up at the next committee meeting because we didn't have enough time to get through it. But I think I want to just highlight one important part of that conversation that we had, which I think the board would, as far as equity and around some of the issues that we've been talking about was, in specific, one of the issues that we discussed were students with junior college or community college 2-year degrees who then went on to 5-year professional accredited degrees, that those accredited institutions were accepting the 2-year community college degrees. Applicants for licensure were being credited like half a unit less than a student who had started in the 5-year. And I want to just highlight that as being like one of the moments that we talked about where we're discussing giving them the same amount of credit, that would be a huge win for the equitable distribution of units throughout those looking for licensure. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Good. Thank you, Tony. With that said, we'd like to open for a public comment. Again, we start with attendees in the room. If you wish to speak, let me know. I don't see a hand, so moderator, we can open up for public comment in remote location and virtual attendees.
We're going to start with Southern California. Do we have any requests for public comment?
No, we're clear.
Wonderful. Moving on to Webex, we are accepting public comment. Please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no requests for public comment, do you wish to move back to the agenda?
Yes, please, moderator. Okay, we are now moved to the sub-item of H, committee reports. The second item is about our LATC, Landscape Architect Technical Committee's meeting. Took place on April 7th and 8th, and we ask Courtney Nation to present this item.
Hi everyone, I'm Courtney Nation. I'm the Landscape Architect Technical Committee's Special Projects Analyst. The LATC held a 2-day meeting in Sacramento on April 7th and 8th. On the first day of the meeting, the LATC discussed the uniform standards for licensure proposed by the Council of Landscape Architectural Registration Boards, or CLARB. LATC previously appointed a subcommittee in January consisting of John Rashinsky and Pamela Brief to prepare recommendations on the proposed resolutions for a vote during CLARB's mid-year update meeting on April 20th. Prior to the mid-year meeting, the LATC submitted 3 letters to CLARB to voice its concern and address discrepancies.
This is the moderator. Can I interrupt, please? Can you move the microphone closer to your face, perhaps?
Can you hear me better?
A little bit closer, please.
Okay. I don't have. Is this better? Is it clear now? Can you hear me?
Very close, perhaps.
Oh, okay. All right.
Wonderful.
Is this better?
Wonderful.
Thank you. Okay. So back to what I was talking about. CLARB had 3 resolutions going up for a vote at their mid-year update meeting on April 20th. Prior to the mid-year meeting, the LATC submitted 3 letters to CLARB to voice its concerns and address discrepancies between California's licensure requirements and CLARB's proposed uniform standard. LATC voted to reject resolutions 1 and 2, which were adoption of the CLARB uniform licensure standard for landscape architecture and revisions to the CLARB model law and regulations to align with the draft uniform licensure standard for landscape architecture. The LATC submitted amendments to Resolution 3, revisions to the CLARB model law and regulations to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in licensure standards and to align with CLARB DEI principles. As it relates to Resolution 1, LATC discussed that adoption of the uniform standard would result in a more restrictive process by applying for licensure in California because the standards do not allow for the alternative pathways currently outlined in California law and would also require an additional 2 years of experience beyond what California currently requires. thus increasing barriers to licensure. Resolution 2, the update to the CLARB model law and model regulations, directly relates to the proposed uniform standards outlined in Resolution 1. And LATC chose not to support Resolution 3 as proposed because the removal of language referencing good moral character did not alleviate concerns of bias when applying for licensure, nor meet the needs of a DEI process. Resolutions 1, 2, and 3, as proposed by CLARB, were adopted on April 20th by the CLARB membership. LATC had discussed the consequences to California if the resolutions which LATC opposed were adopted. While LATC members expressed appreciation for CLARB's efforts in creating uniform standards to protect licensure, the model law and regulations do not serve California's best interests and are not enforceable by CLARB. California will continue to accept its current licensure requirements as outlined in its statutes and regulations. Additionally, in response to one of the letters LATC sent to CLARB, on January 18th, 2022, CLARB's President Chuck Smith and CEO Matt Miller invited a representative from the LATC to participate in a 2023 work group to evaluate the outcomes of the upcoming job task analysis and determine how they might influence refinements to experience required for licensure. The LATC voted to appoint John Roshinsky to participate in the CLARB work group. On the second day of the LATC's April meeting, April 8th, the LATC worked with DCA Solid, who facilitated the developing new strategic plan objectives for 2022 through 2024, and the draft strategic plan will be reviewed by the LATC and presented to the board for approval at the next board meeting. And that concludes my update. Thank you.
Okay, the board members, you may have a comment on these actions and discussions by Landscape Architect Technical Committee. And also, if you wish, we can take a benefit of John Luzinski is here. He's the chair. He can provide more in-depth information. We do need action to adopt, I think, for this item. So any discussions from our board members?
President Fang, I want to first say, as the liaison to the Landscape Architects Committee, I was actually thrilled and really excited about the level of discourse that the committee engaged in, both in terms of their discussions about CLARB as well as the strategic planning sessions. I commend both Chairman Wazinski for his leadership and the committee as a whole for the level of engagement. So just wanted to make that public.
Okay. John, I can open up for public comments if you feel need to provide additional information for the board before we take action. Okay. I think he's feel comfortable. Why not let, Laura, you can read the motion first before we move.
Sure.
Okay. Before we do that, I want to do a housekeeping item. Board member Sylvia Kwong joined us at around 10:45. Just for the record.
Thank you. So the suggested motion for this item is move to approve and adopt the second modified text for Article 1, Division 26, Title 16, Subsection 2620.5, which was sent out for a 15-day public comment period from April 1st, 2022 to April 18th, 2022. And no adverse comments were received. Direct staff to prepare and submit the final rulemaking documents to the Director of DCA and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, and authorize the EO to make any technical or non-substantive changes that may be required in completing the rulemaking file.
Any questions, discussions? I'm not seeing board members request. Why not see if any members want to move the motion?
I'll move the motion.
Okay. Secretary Gladstone moved the motion, and do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Ron Jones, second. We can go ahead and vote before the public comment. Okay. Okay. So I do like formally open the public comment period and see if any comments from the room and remote location and the virtual attendees.
No comment here in West Hollywood.
And I did not see attendees from the room as well. Request for comment. So we're ready for virtual attendees. Moderator.
This is the moderator. We are now accepting public comment via Webex. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please. We will now carry on the vote.
Okay, roll call, shall we?
Yes, please.
Ken Fang?
Aye.
Brett Gladstone, aye. Mitra Kanani?
Aye.
This
Sylvia
is the
Kwan?
moderator. My apologies for the interruption. We have a late request for comment. Do you wish to address it or continue the vote?
Yes, I would like to reverse our order back.
All right, bear with us, Cheryl. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. All right, Cheryl, we see that you're unmuted. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I would like the board to consider requiring any documents that are presented for any type of permit, conditional use permit, coastal permit, any type of planning permit, also require a professional signature. You know, when they're required to be a licensed professional, such as a 3-story or more. I see several projects that are going through Coastal Commission that are done by unlicensed individuals. They don't have any kind of professional stamping. They're being accepted in local planning departments and the Coastal Commission, reviewed. Then some of those items or projects have had issues in the future and had to go through the process again. It's a tremendous disservice to the consumer because they are being, you know, dragged through this whole process of CUPs, Coastal Commission permitting, and then find out that they may really need a licensed professional. Anyways, that's my my suggestion that the board take under for their review.
I just want to confirm that your comment is referring to the LATC's regulatory proposals.
Yes.
Okay. Council, can we also hear another public comment? Since we already go back to Ron, not Ron again. I keep I'm sorry. John Rosinski, any other comment and response? I don't see this regulation directly impacts that, but anything you can help with the board in responding to the current public comment? you can request to speak, then we can allow you to speak. John Rosinski.
This is the moderator. John, we've sent you a request to unmute your microphone.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm a little confused. I would say that the comments that we just heard, I don't think are directly related to this particular item. I do want to say that just wanted to thank the board for taking up this item. It's very important to the LATC and to the extension certificate program in general. So with that, that's all the comments that I have.
Thank you, John. We're coming back, unless we see more public comments requests, we are coming back to our agenda and we are ready to vote.
Okay. Let me start the roll call again. We're voting on item A. I'm sorry, we're voting on item
H2.
H2, excuse me, not A. Tien Feng.
Aye.
Brett Gladstone, aye. Mitra Kanani.
Aye.
Sylvia Kwan.
Aye.
Ron Johnson. Oh, I'm sorry, Ron Jones, excuse
Aye.
me. Robert Sherman.
Aye.
Nilza Serrano. Sunny Ward.
Aye.
Okay, we have 6 members.
Okay, vote is unanimous. So, sorry, I started train of mispronouncing people's names. So, anyway, we are going to go to the next agenda item, sub-agenda of H, and we call it H3, discuss and a possible action on board's committee policy. And I just want to give a quick overview. I will have Laura give you the detailed information if you need to. And over the years, maybe even decades, we have a good structure for our board meetings, but our committee meetings and the committee formation process and the committee members' qualifications are generally loose and can be more organized. So the staff and the board members took the action and take the opportunity of the context with our strategic plan. We formalized our board committees practice in few ways, and we initially received very positive feedback, and I ask Laura Zuniga to give a presentation, whatever you think the level of detail you want to share with the board members.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize, the draft changes to the policy are in the packet, but we didn't provide an introduction to kind of explain the changes. But as Tion said, this is part of the board's administrative procedure manual. And so this is just kind of some changes that we really implemented with this strategic plan cycle, but to shrink the size of the committees a little bit. The committees had held both board members and non-board members, so this is going to shrink them to 5 members so that we have a majority of board members on them, which we think will kind of help the flow of information and discussion between the committees and the boards, and make them maybe a little bit more manageable for meeting purposes. Also, it's in the past, committee members weren't subject to the same requirements as board members, but now they need to follow the same kind of training requirements, ethics requirements, complete all that training. So it's a lot to ask of you all, but also of committee members. So we thought it just might make it a little bit easier. So it's really just kind of shrinking the size down a bit and formalizing the changes we've already made.
So we formalized the number of meetings should take place. So overall, we just use this opportunity to develop a committee that will be very effectively supports strategic agendas and provide the board with very informative insight before the board take actions. So these are very clearly laid out as the committee's charge. So, and Sunny, you have done good work with the Professional Qualification Committee. I understand Communication Committee is going to meet again soon, and so it's good work. Thanks, everyone, staff and the committee members. It's an effort. So with that said, any questions for Laura and myself on the committees? Okay.
Robert Chairman, just one comment. I assume, just to be clear, the reference to one public member in the committee composition does not mean public member in the sense of the board public members, but just someone generally who's not on the board itself.
That's correct. We really focus on the diversity in terms of representing the profession and the consumer's perspective. That's why I have that requirement. Thank you, Robert.
Have we ever had a problem getting a member of the public to serve?
We are very fortunate. We do have public member volunteer for their time. As Laura mentioned, this become more rigorous because the members have to fill all the paperwork and receive a training just like a board member. I really appreciative, and thank you so much for those listening or not listening there to volunteer your time. It's a wonderful committees. Okay. I think we can open for public comment. Oh, yes or no? Okay. And again, start with the room. Any comment from you in the room? I see none. Moderator, we can do as usual, remote location and a virtual attendee.
There's no comment from West Hollywood.
Wonderful, thank you. We are now accepting public comment via Webex. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment to the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few moments now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please, moderator. So since it is a policy and we would like the boards to actually adopt it, so that requires someone to move this motion to adopt the policy, and then we need a vote on it. I move to adopt the policy of board committees.
I second.
Okay. So, public comment? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we need to go through the process again. Yeah. Any comments about the motion and a second from the board members? And then we're open to public one more time.
No comment from West Hollywood.
Okay. I have not seen here. Okay. We can move to for public comment again, moderator. And again, for the attendees in the room, if you wish to speak, you can just go ahead or raise your hand. I don't see any. Moderator, we can then open to next location and virtual attendees.
Having heard from West Hollywood, we're going to open up for public comment via Webex. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda, Mr. President?
Yes, please. So let me do housekeeping checking. Anyone would like have a short quality of life break? I call them quality of life. Okay. Are you everyone okay if we work up to another half hour and bring one more agenda and then we have a break? Okay. We voted? No?
Yeah.
Okay. We need to vote on the motion. Sorry, we retract. We're going to vote on the motion as has been seconded on board's committee policy.
Okay. We're going to vote now on this item for draft committee, board committee policy. Tian Feng?
Aye.
Brett Gladstone, aye. Mitra Kanani?
Aye.
Sylvia Kwan?
Aye.
Ron Jones?
Aye.
Robert Perman?
Aye.
Sunny Ward?
Aye.
Great.
Okay, we have
Unanimous.
6 votes.
Okay. So the next agenda is I, Executive Officer's report on various of subjects, and we will ask Laura Zuniga to present that. Keep in mind some of the key initiatives and issues are actually listed separately in our agenda. We will discuss them one by one. So just keep that in mind when Laura provides an overview of the executive's report.
Thank you. Okay, so this is starting on page 46 of your packet. I'll just go through the highlights. Let's see, on the budget, we're continuing to monitor our budget. We'll have the budget office give a presentation to the board with an update on our fund condition at the September board meeting. So we'll get a more detailed briefing for the members, and you'll have a chance to ask questions, and we'll see where we're at. In here,
This is the moderator. Can we ask you to put your face closer to the microphone, please?
Sure. How's that?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. We note in here the business modernization project was projected to commence in spring 2022, and it has. We had a meeting of the Executive Steering Committee yesterday. I do want to thank Trish Rodriguez from LATC and Blake Clark from LATC. Blake is serving as really like the hands-on subject matter expert for both the board and LATC as we work on implementation. But so we did have a meeting yesterday. We're looking at having the first, what they call minimum viable product, the first release of the new system early this fall in September or October. And the projected closeout of the system, so having it completely online, would be November of 2023. So we're making progress. We're getting there. This is exciting. It'll make big improvements for both staff and for licensees. Are there any questions? Okay. Moving on, we have an update on personnel on the next page, as well as update on outreach and our social media. Also, I'll just add in here, I did, it's not reflected in this report, but on Monday, I participated in a webinar, I guess, with AIA San Diego and with the student group to talk about the workplace environment and unpaid internships, and in fact, they shouldn't be participating in unpaid internships and deserve to be paid, and they won't receive credit for their work through the AXP program. So AIA San Diego did a good job of putting that on, and I appreciate that they invited our participation. So moving on to page 3, we have an update on regulatory proposals. As John mentioned, we have a lot of these on the agenda later on, so I'm not going to go into detail now. I did just want to thank Kim McDaniel from the board staff, who is the main person working on our regulations, as well as Karen Halbo, our regulations attorney, and lots of our board staff who have spent a lot of time working on regulations. They become a lot more time intensive, so I just appreciate everyone's time on these. As you'll see when we discuss them later on, they're a challenge. They can be a challenge to work on. So going on, there's also an update on the LATC proposals. You can note they had a proposal before the board had theirs to include the license number on their advertisements, and that has gone into effect January of this year. And then moving on page 8, we start with the licensing statistics. You can see the CSE pass rate data. Right now, the first-time test takers are at 74%, the most recent data. Underneath that is our ARE data that's specific to California. And then on page 9, we have the comparison data between California and the national pass rate. You can see the biggest area where we have, or the biggest differences in the construction evaluation division. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you elaborate on the webinar, San Diego webinar with the students in the AIA? Did I hear you, or did I understand you to say that they were discouraging unpaid internships?
Yeah, so it's that, for the work experience that an applicant needs to submit traditionally through the AXP, but for licensure, NCAR won't take work that is unpaid, only in very narrow circumstances for like a true community-based organization, for like a true volunteer project, maybe like a Habitat for Humanity. But for the most part, they need to be paid for their work in order to get credit for it, and it's to encourage students to know that they should receive value for the work that they provide.
And I think that my only comment about that, and I think it's a really great position to have, but I think that we both as a industry need to do a better job, particularly the AIA and the state board and CAB for that matter, in communicating that to practitioners. Because academic students really don't have any leverage. They're looking for an opportunity to develop skill sets. And so they're grabbing at any opportunity that's presented to them. But I think we owe it to them to do a better job at communicating to the industry that we require paid internships as opposed to basically leaving it open and having the students be vulnerable to those opportunities.
And have it sort of be self-regulated. That's a good point. I did ask staff to put some more information on our website because I don't think we really touch on this, but we'll enhance it and maybe do some additional outreach. And to licensees is a good point because they need to be aware as well, and it could be some of them aren't aware of this. So we don't get a whole lot of complaints in this area. And it's not always so much something that we can deal with versus it being like a labor and employment issue, but certainly we can definitely do a better job of educating people as to what their rights are. So thank you.
Ron, is very good. I could interrupt you a little bit. So Mitra Kanadi is also was at that meeting because she was really actively involved with iPods with new schools. Just in case she has some additional information you want to share with Ron and the board from that conference, you are more than welcome. Inside.
I wasn't in that conference.
There were two separate meetings. So the one I was talking about happened just this past Monday, but I forgot about that one. It was a large firm roundtable with San Diego that we attended in person, and Mitra was there and gave some great comments from her perspective. That was with different, large firm representatives in San Diego.
Okay, great. So, but I'm very glad that we are active and we at least got invited, and we have the presence in this conversation is very important. Laura, thank you for attending, and also Mitra for attending. Anyway, okay. So
can I just make one comment, Tian? I'm sorry to stop you there as well.
Yes.
I also just want to remind everybody that I think there's like a checklist of what's legal as far as unpaid internships are concerned, and that in order to have an unpaid internship in the state of California, and I may be wrong, I'm not a lawyer, and this is not my area of expertise, but I believe it has to be tied to that student's education and degree somehow. So architects that are doing this are really bending the truth, I believe, and sort of slipping this in dishonestly, because I think in most cases, like most things, you could make the case that any expertise is helpful towards a degree, but my gut is that most aren't. And so I believe that to be the case, and I just also wanted to point that out.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sonny. California law doesn't prohibit unpaid internships, but it does. There's a test that needs to be met, and there's several criteria, and really it means like it has to benefit the student and not the person they're working for. But yeah, so we will try to do a good job of trying to summarize that information and make it kind of something that we can easily push out to potential applicants as well as to licensees.
Yeah, I think this is AIA bylaws, right? If you are a member of AIA, you wouldn't have to pay. Yeah. So notice the difference of an NGO's bylaws versus state's policy. So anyway, but good discussion. Yeah. If that's everything, we do public comment. We don't need action, but no actions. We can open for public comment. Any person in the room wish to speak, go ahead, let us know. And otherwise, moderator, we can do the remote location and the virtual attendee public comment. on the executive report, agenda I.
We are now looking for public comment in the Southern California location.
No comment.
Wonderful. Public comment via Webex is now open. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests for comments. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please. So start from agenda J. I think these items will have a significant discussion, so I want to have a quick survey. We can take a break, maybe coming back to restart the meeting at noon, which is 24 minutes from now, and we go through these items. Or we have time, if any members or publicly insist we need to start right now, we may have time to do one item, item J, on net zero net carbon. And what is the board member's opinion? Taking a break now or do one more item?
I'll just point out that I think this particular item could take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, so just everyone keep that in mind.
Okay. I also like to see public members' feedback. Do you have problems if we take a lunch break now and we resume our meeting at 12 o'clock? Okay. I see we have public support too, and I hope your support continues for next 3 agenda items. Okay, I'm counting on you. But anyway, with that said, we will have 23 minutes now break, and we'll come back to noon. Thank you, everyone. Okay.
Did you go to NCAR?
Oh, no, let me use this. This is the tool, it's the first time I use. So our board meeting resumed at 12:07, 7 minutes delay. And our next agenda is item J, discuss and a possible action on new proposed regulatory text for zero net carbon design continuing education. Okay, I think the best to start with this item is have our staff, Karen Hobart, provide an overview and some contextual information, some of the recommendations, language on rulemakings, where they came from and how they relate to the industry. So with that said, Karen, are you ready?
Yes, thank
Great.
you.
Okay, thank you.
And thank all of the board for being here today. I was just shaking in my boots that we'd have to cancel again. The zero net carbon is being promulgated as regulations because the legislature passed a law for the new continuing education, and we've been working on regulatory language and learning from the other continuing education rulemaking that's in the process. And there's been feedback to staff about potentially additional changes. So the language that was provided to you that has the introduction of, at least if you look starting on the beginning of Section 166 on the first page of the proposed regulatory language, in the definition section, subdivision A2, it's adding in the term equitably, talking about procuring carbon-free offsets. and adding language, and instead of talking about building operations energy consumption being looked at annually, but being looked at over the building project's life cycle. These are important and useful changes that reflect deeper knowledge than the people who tried to put together this text for you. That's good. Moving in the right direction is the point. We have on the second page in subdivision C, a broadening of acceptable course topics and subject matters that would be acceptable to meet this continuing education requirement. And instead of, I don't know if you have the highlighted version or just the version that shows strike through and changes, but the sentence now reads, examples of zero net carbon CE coursework topics or subjects may include any one or combination of the following. And we've struck out highly insulated and used the term energy efficient building systems and struck out the term envelope design. Deep energy efficient retrofits of existing design. Advanced energy.
This is the moderator.
Yes.
I apologize for the interruption. Can you move closer to the microphone, please?
Not in this building. They have a lot of cases here. All right. Let's see. So adding efficiency retrofits of existing buildings instead of structures, natural ventilation, daylighting, solar harvesting design, advanced energy efficient strategies, renewable energy strategies, embodied carbon analysis, then a correction of the citation to the Cal Green, renewable energy systems, environmental sustainability, resilient design, and climate justice. And I did have to go look up resilient design and learned that it's about designing buildings to deal with climate change. But I also understood that some of the members of the board had been giving this some thought, and that there was additional proposed language for revising the subsection A2. And usually whoever has put the thought and effort in describes that change, but I believe it was handout 3 for this agenda item, in that it changes the adding in one more sentence to the existing A2 with the changes that were submitted to add the sentence that by definition, zero net carbon design requirement. This also includes architectural design responsive to embodied carbon reduction and resilient performance of a facility that results in reduced embodied carbon or minimized carbon that would have otherwise resulted from reconstruction. And you as the board have so much experience in this area that I am reduced to Googling many phrases. So this is the proposed language changes that the board's being asked to vote on. And if those who helped work on that want to address that it's better, or if you guys with your experience can look at it and go, yeah, that's better, move on, that's fine too. And we'd like to have this text to move forward and start the rulemaking process. So, we'd then be sent out for a 45-day public comment period. So what we're looking for is the board to accept these changes and instruct staff to move forward with the rulemaking process with the text having these changes.
If I can just add, Karen, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think, so the PQ committee talked about this, but this is the first time it's coming to the board as a whole, right? So it's the board's first look at the language, and then so their first option to move it forward.
Okay.
That's right. And that's right. And if it's okay with you guys, and if it's okay with Tian, I could give a little bit more background to our qualification, to our committee meeting that I abbreviated before.
Yeah, before you start, Karen, do you want to speak more, or we're ready for discussion? Yeah.
I'm going to learn from your discussion.
Okay. Sunny, I hope you learn good things from us. Sunny, yes, your turn.
Okay, so I'm going to take us back to handout 1, which has the, is there any way to get these on the screen, by the way? No. Okay. I think it would be helpful because this is so technical. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I think this is important because 166A2, the definition, this is essentially the yellow marks are staff's response to our committee's meeting. And so the discussion in our committee revolved around, the concerns were from our previous board meetings. If you remember, before SB 1010 came into being, our board was interested in expanding continuing education units. So separately, I don't think we need to go back and put the 4 categories up on the screen, but to remind you, category 2 of the continuing education units that our board was suggesting that maybe we increase the amount beyond the ADA requirement was sustainability. And so one portion of our conversation in regards to defining zero net carbon design revolved around obviously our board's interest in expanding the breadth and the amount and the variety of continuing education units, and specifically in category 2, those that revolve around sustainability. And so the question was, do a lot of those courses and comments and things that the board had in their sort of strategic plan, can they also fulfill and will they fulfill the requirements of continuing education units with this definition that the staff had recommended? So after that meeting, staff came back with, at my suggestion, some very small changes as one option to this definition. That option is what you see on the screen and in yellow. So the subtle changes that were made were the addition of the word equitably from procures, because it felt like in some of the discussion, I had specifically some concern, and especially from some of the response from the AIA, that they wanted to actually narrow the qualifications for continuing education units as they revolved around sort of climate justice and climate equity, which I felt, and I think other members of the board or the committee and also the board have felt very strongly that is a strong component of zero net carbon design. Now, at some point during this discussion, we may open this up to sort of talk about the sort of broader context of zero net carbon design in business, in California law, and in architectural design. But for purposes of right now, I want to just zero in, sort of laser in on the changes that were made to the previous staff definition, which was the insertion of the word equitably, and then also responding to, and I believe rightly so, some of the comments from public, AIA, and also our committee, that the word annually, while it's been used sort of, and I put quote under this, corporately in the world to talk about the sort of energy consumption of a building, that really wasn't responding to the sort of architectural life process design from beginning to end and the lifetime cost of a building. So the word annually was struck, and the addition of over the building's project life cycle, which would mean from inception to forever or until the building ceases to exist. So those were the very subtle and simple and easy changes that were made to this definition. Now, subsequently, I had a more complicated definition that, for purposes of the meeting, the choices were made sort of outside of me to sort of not include that in today's discussion. We can certainly bring that back up at some point, and I have a copy of it. I'd have to read it. I don't know if that would be able to be brought up on the screen. But then that brings us to handout number 3, and I don't know if we can put that on the screen, which is Tian had, and I'll let Tian speak to this, in interaction with the AIA, came up with a pretty completely different definition. And if we could get that on the screen, I'll sort of let that be the segue to let sort of Tian talk about that definition. It's a completely different handout. It's called handout 3. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I think that's enough for me for now.
Okay. Thank you, Sunny, for providing some context to how this PQC committee work on this and lead to this discussion. But I'd like to actually come back, hopefully put the staff's proposal on screen, which is in the handout, right? Article 10 and page 65. Can we project that? Instead of this one, this is among the few proposals. So I want to start with commending staff's work. It is never easy to translate practical-oriented legislation, such as AB 1010, to a tangible, that sometimes prescriptive and rulemaking document, so the consumer can benefit from it, and this board can enforce and apply to them. That's a huge leap. So thank you for your good work. And the 2 is staff during the process is willing the openness of discuss with board members, and even to today, Carrie indicating that we can work through this together. So I just want to, for the purpose of managing the discussion, I use staff's proposal on screen. And a little bit of recap about where the original goal or charges for the PQC was developing a comprehensive, modernized continuing education program for the state of California's licensees. And through 2.5 years of work, the PQC has delivered to the board adopted a comprehensive plan for continuing education. An element of that plan is ask for architects that to be competent in address our building's impact to the nature, and then in return, the nature start impact us. So we want our education address both from our impact to the nature, to the weather, and then because of that, the weather and the nature impacts us, and how can we make our built environment more resilient. So that was under this charge that we, in collaboration with AIA California, expanded the idea of what we should learn through net zero carbon design. Be aware of, in the legislation, there's no definition of zero net carbon design. It is a staff, AIA, or other entities work with board members, try to define it and perfect it. And we cannot perfect it until industry become more advanced in that practice. So this is, in a way, what staff proposed is a milestone. As a milestone, we can start using them, and we can always, as years to come, to better them, okay? So that something I think is important. But with that said, some of the principle we want other part of community to know, such as AIA, is the life cycle aspects of our built environment, not just the operating part. You cannot invest a tremendous amount of carbon to build an environment that operation-wise efficient is net zero. But you are on your way to building that with a very negative impact to the carbon. So that notion this board feel important to share with our collaterals and our partners. And so it is with this context that the staff has developed this and modified this guideline. And today, I think we want to have some additional feedbacks from AI, from our practitioners, from firm, and from our partner agencies of Division of State Architects. Your voice are welcome. So with that said, I'd like quickly ask other board members like to make some comment, and I like open to the public and to hear their view.
Let me ask for clarification. There were several handouts, and there's several versions of this, so I'm a little confused. The one that was handed out, that's called Handout 3 for Agenda Item J, it's got some text that is not highlighted and some text that is highlighted. Do I understand that this entire thing, the highlighted and non-highlighted, came from AIA? No.
No.
Can you describe who this came from and why one portion is highlighted?
Maybe explain a little bit more what are these handouts is going to do with, I understand this is what was on the screen was the staff's proposal, right?
Okay.
Based on all the input.
That's what I'm asking about. Thank you. It's staff. Okay. Thank you. That answered my question. I have comments about it, but I'll reserve my comments till later.
Okay. Well, let me continue on that question. So is the staff revision based solely on, I mean, it's only relating to A2. What about the rest of the document?
Heavily on C as well.
Which one are we looking? It is confusing with the handouts.
Yeah, I think you need to tell the public and the board what is the intent. I thought the document that is in the real format is what the staff's proposal, right? And these proposals are based on few versions of board members' input, and you attach these board members' input. Is that?
Yeah. Kim, can you summarize what the handouts are? Do you recall? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me clear enough, or? Okay, good.
Your name, please?
My name is Kimberly McDaniel, and I work for the California Architects Board, and I have the pleasure of working primarily on regulations. And so the text in your packet is based on the PQC meeting and that feedback. And you have 3 additional things that came in once we had our packet made, and there were additional discussions that sort of fell outside of what the PQC had seen. And so this third handout is, my understanding, this is an expanded definition since the packet was made that board president wanted to be discussed and considered, okay? So number 3, that's up on the, that's what that is. And then attachment number 1, can you pull attachment number 1? And remember, Quan, to answer your question, the primary changes have been to the definition section and the section about the topics. So those are the 2 primary, okay. So let's take a look at handout number 1. These are some changes, and you will see that they have been highlighted. So the yellow, if you're able to see the yellow highlights, for some it may be gray. You see, those are the changes from what's in the packet with the changes highlighted.
And I think those changes came from Sonny and his committee, right?
It came.
May I?
The yellow ones.
Right.
I just want to clarify one thing further. We've had 2 committee meetings, okay? And so the document that's in our packet, the original language, was the language that staff created after the first meeting. The document that's on the screen now with the highlights, those were revisions that came after the second meeting. And so just to be clear, that gets us to where we are now. And lastly, handout 3 also came after the last meeting. So I just wanted the board to understand that.
I'm going to go back to explaining the handout. So handout number 1, the way it differs from what's in the packet is that the changes that are being, that you should maybe look at and discuss are highlighted. Depending on your version, it's either going to be in yellow or gray. Those are the changes that are from what's in your packet. Because in order to make a packet, we have to get this thing out many days in advance. We get everything approved by the legal team. And so, you know, changes that come in 2 or 3 days before the board meeting are impractical to include, okay? So you have handout number 1, either yellow or gray highlight, and then handout number 2 is merely handout number 1 without the highlight. So it's a clean version. Some people, it's easier to see without the handout, and some, it's so we want to make sure that we kind of have an opportunity for people with different learning styles. So that's all handout number 2 is. It's 1, and the highlights are removed. And so it's saying if the board decides to accept all of these, this is what your text would look like.
Okay.
Now I want to go back to 3 real quick. This is just an additional piece of information that your board president has presented as another option for text. The reason why it's highlighted is the highlighted part is the change from what's in your packet.
Okay, okay.
Okay? That's the only reason why it's highlighted.
Thank you for that explanation.
Okay. Okay.
Now I think
you guys
I got
go
it.
on- Go forward and discuss. And
One more question. Who added in handout 3 the highlighted?
The committee, right?
That was our president. Okay, thank you.
So I like to reduce the discussion of technicalities of these versions. I just want to make sure, to me, Kim, some of our comments already incorporated in the package, the official formal document I keep ask moderator to display, which is this document, if you can go back. Although some of the remarks not incorporated, but I think for the purpose of managing this meeting, we can live with this document that you presented in the handout as a base document. If anyone, including myself, want to revise the text, maybe we can take this opportunity to do it. But let's not be confused by another handout. But it is difficult to manage so many documents. So my question to staff is the document on page 65 is your proposal for the board to take action?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so good. So let me direct your attention to A2, which is on page 65, which is the definition through some collaborations with various of our organizations, and incorporate some of our inputs, such as including resilient design for new construction or existing, and also mention about procured from outside. And the only part that, Sunny, that you indicated that annual lay was removed, but it's still here. Now, the difference here is I want the board member to aware of that, is if you say this, you're more going back to measure your zero net carbon annually in operating-based scenario. That is not the goal and objective of this board. We want architects to understand the entire process of built environment from cradle to grave, that the impact of carbon is accumulatively formed. And as we want to reduce them, we should reduce them in a cumulative way as well, from the early construction to the operation. So if you would ask my opinion, I suggest we can go along with the definition of A2, but remove or reward by omitting that annually. Is that something, Sunny, is that also in line with what your early explanation? I welcome other board members weighing in as well.
May I ask a question? Mr. President, you worked on handout 3. Are you saying that you'd like us to concentrate on not on handout 3, which we just viewed on the screen, but subsection A2 on page 65 of our packet?
Yeah, because staff proposed this, and it is not the level of inclusiveness we would like, I would like, but I think for the purpose of moving forward with this rulemaking document, and we can live as it is.
Okay, so your recommendation is that we not discuss handout 3. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, I think I get it now.
Yeah.
What you're saying is, A2 relies on an annual assessment of the energy consumption of a building after it's been constructed. What you're saying is that we should be more inclusive and talk about the entire construction process as well as its operating footprint thereafter. So you're trying to be more inclusive, and I totally agree with that. Because if you just measure the energy consumption during an annual basis, it only talks about the operational impact.
Yeah.
You're saying we it's actually cradle to cradle. You're actually saying that we need to look at it from the minute that we start thinking about construction, all the products, because, steel, concrete are all very highly embedded energy to create. So do you use recycled steel? Do you use recycled concrete as a means of reducing that impact? Is that correct?
Very accurately, thank you. And the reason we do that is because we're under the charge of how we're going to align with this opportunity with our strategic plan for a more comprehensive education approach. That's the one category.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we need to spend the time to be absolutely clear that we get what we actually want and not water it down. Okay? So whatever it takes to get it to the point where your committee as well as yourself representing the committee feels that it's done properly. So what do we have to do that?
That's the definition. We can look at it. And also, I think it's very, very important for this body is how do we enforce that continuing education in terms of a topic and providers and all that. That is on C. Again, staff has incorporated some of our input, but kept the most part of their original design. So I still encourage you, if okay with Sunny, is not spending time to look at the handout 2 and 3, concentrate on staff's current version, see how can we make improvement and take action against this item.
If I could just add, and maybe I can ask the question of Sunny, or not. Handout 2, handout 1 and 2, because it's the same, that has the changes that Sunny recommended to improve the draft that came out of TQ. Is that accurate, Kim? Yes. So that might be the best starting point for the board to discuss, because I don't think, staff's not objecting to those changes, they're just showing the difference from what came to TQ. The change that was in handout 3 was it was more substantively different, so that's why it's contained separately, because it's sort of a broader change. But the changes that are in handout 1 and 2, I think are more easily incorporated in the draft that is before us. Is that accurate, Karen or Kim, to summarize? Okay.
You can do either. You can take some content of handout 2 and 3, and as long as my request is can easily modify of the existing text the staff produced. For example, Sunny's main comment is adding words on your A2 that equitably procured from outside. You just said, the current text just said procured. So I just want to have this, make the conversation manageable. We try to stick with this version and incorporate what's the best. Yeah.
Thank you. I can ask a simple question, and this is both to the authors of the amendments. Is this a matter of wordsmithing? Yeah. And I guess my question is the proposed modification, does it compromise the intent and the integrity of the original document?
Yeah.
And my feeling is that if it doesn't compromise the intent or the integrity, then the document is strong enough to carry its own weight. The language may make it better, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what's there does not satisfy the intent. And that it's a question to the authors of the amendment.
Yeah, Sonny, you want to weigh in how critical it is, including the equitably procures equitably. For example, this is a good example to show our...
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'd love to speak. I think there's about 3 or 4 conversations that are sort of floating here all together. So I'm going to try to tackle each one of them clearly. To Ron's question that he just asked, the text of what's in the packet, and to my best knowledge, handouts 1 and 2, according to our question or my questions that I've had to staff and to legal, do fulfill the intent of what we've been charged to do with SB 1010. I think handout 3, and again, I will bring this back to just discussing what's the language in handout, but I think we have to talk about the handouts in order to respond to Ron's question. Handout 3 may respond, but it requires a much bigger and longer and more complicated conversation. And to that point, I want to remind the entire board that whatever we vote on today does not mean that this discussion is closed and cannot be continued, because I think it's a very important conversation. It's one of the most important things that we're sort of dealing with in our lives with climate change. And so this should be an ongoing discussion. So I don't think that whatever we vote on, regardless of what the language is today, will be the end of this discussion. So I think that's key for everybody to remember, that the work of the committee will continue on, and as will the dialogue with the AIA and with the board. So I think that responds to Ron's question. To respond to Tian's comment about why the equitably is so important to me, I'll go back to Tian's first statement, though, about dealing with the language in the packet, and his suggestion that maybe a better solution to the end of the sentence is actually to remove the word annually. I'm all for simplicity, and I think that very much might be a better solution than the yellow portion in handout 1, which adds over the building's project life cycle, because simply removing the word annually allows the continuing education instructors and academics and the NGOs that are teaching these classes to more sort of broadly define and dive into the very broad areas and very specific topics of that. So I would be 100% on board with simply striking the word annually and not adding the words in yellow after annually that say over the building project's life cycle. I'm 100% on board with that. I'm also 100% on board keeping that change. So either way, I'm okay with that. I want the board to know that. The equitably word for me is really important. And for me, it's a deal breaker, and it's a line that I'm not personally willing to cross today. And the reason is it's a bigger conversation with zero net carbon design. And I want to try to just sort of, like, as quickly as possible describe why it's important to me. And the reason is in this idea that a building needs to procure offset renewable energy. There's a lot of problems with climate justice and climate equity where that energy is produced, and the livelihoods and the neighborhoods and the real estate where that energy could potentially come from. And I believe we have to have a sort of moral standing. And so that word equitably reminds us, as we continue to have this conversation, that people's lives and our environment in other countries, in other states, in disadvantaged communities can be severely impacted by this type of legislation and this type of work. And I think it's a testament to say that we're able to require that it was easier for the state legislature to require the California Architects Board to require continuing education units before the state has actually been able to pass any laws in regards to the requirement for new construction to have zero net carbon design. And the reason is because it's complex and that there's many layers to this. And I want, especially when it comes to disenfranchised communities, to make sure that their voices are heard throughout the design process. And so for me, that's why the equitable word is extremely important.
Any other opinions?
Yeah, I agree with our president that it should say annually should come out, and it should say over the building lifespan or something similar to that. And I agree with Sunny that it equitably should be there. And I'd like other board members to comment on that. But then after that, I would like to have on the screen for our benefit, for the public's benefit, the entire thing that Sunny's committee came up with. I don't believe in, looking at one screen for one paragraph, another screen for another paragraph. As a lawyer, I believe in seeing the entire text all together because things relate to each other so closely. So because our committee came up with it and put a lot of time into it, after talking about the two words I just talked about, I'd really appreciate having on the screen for discussion what Sunny's committee drafted and not so much what's in our packet, to the extent they're different.
Maybe you mean our strategic plans, continuing education, that's the PowerPoint.
Okay, that is Sunny's. But I want the highlighted version.
Okay, so that was
Handout one.
handout one. You can display handout one, please.
Yeah, but first, does any other board members have an issue with the word equitably or taking the word annually out?
No, not at all. My only problem with equitably is I don't know what that means.
Yeah, this
I don't know what
is
it means.
a lot lately.
So Sunny, why don't you?
With no meaning.
Yeah, I think that I actually think that the term equitable is extremely important as well. But I want Sunny to kind of expound on that since it's his language. But I clearly understand the position that he's making.
No, we understand the concept, but what does it mean when it comes to, how procurement in the state of California, sometimes it's very specific. Like, you shall not buy anything from South Africa. Remember that? And then you shall not buy things from whatever. Now it's probably Russia. It's very specific. So I don't know. I understand what equitably can mean, but I don't know what it means in your interpretation that it can have teeth.
And Sunny, sorry, just before you comment on that, this is a good discussion because, as Karen has told us previously, we're going to have to define this term because anyone reading this needs to be able to understand it, even people who aren't as familiar with it. So this will be very helpful in our rulemaking package.
Sunny, as a lawyer, may I suggest some language to make it clear equitably?
As it relates to this
Yes,
definition.
as it relates to A2. Equitably to me means keeping in mind the communities from which power is procured, something like that. And that, I think, provides the definition that some of our board members want. And I'm wondering if we could play with that phrase, Sunny. So, for example, we could word it, looking at the second line, resilient designs of new construction and or existing facilities that produces on-site or procures energy from off-site, keeping in mind the community from which such power is obtained, and that phrase would be in parens, continuing on, enough carbon-free renewable energy to meet building operations or energy consumption, take out annually, and keep in over the building's project's life cycle.
So I can give you, and again, I'll let Sunny kind of elaborate on this, but I'll give you a classic example that happens all the time, is that off-site renewable energy is oftentimes located in underserved communities.
Correct. That's what we're talking about.
Health hazard, potential health hazards has not been thoroughly evaluated, but so equitably placing those in disenfranchised communities, that's where the equitable application comes in.
Of course.
So when Sunny says that we have to look at the impact that these resources and how they're applied and how they're distributed, that's why it becomes so much more.
And that's what I had in mind with my phrase.
That's just one example.
Any thoughts on that phrase, since
yeah, I see our board member Mitra clearly like to weigh in. Why not you share your perspective?
Well, I just wanted to bring up an issue. As an educator and author, I would like to say that in research and publications that are mostly educational, it's very important to have interpretation and meaning. It's always a section on glossary of the words and terms and idioms. So I don't know if for legal documents it's norm or not, but it's very important in this case, which relates to education, to have some sort of meaning interpretation of the terms, like equitable. You were asking how anyone can make a different meaning of this, and it's being used so many times these days, the word equitable. And it's, I think, adding a section, glossary section at the end of this I don't know, what do you call it, zero net carbon continuing education section, it would be important it's very important for the readers to understand what they are supposed to take as a requirement for their CEU. Also, there was something that I got lost in the jungle of all the discussions that related to A2. I'm not sure if I gathered it correctly, that Tian, you want to exclude the highlighted section?
No, I want this conversation based on the highlighted section. The section, I don't know how I cannot see from this, 2.8, which proposed by staff with incorporate some of our suggestions already, and make it better. And then our vote will be based on that definition.
Yeah, so the reason I'm asking this particularly relates to the word reconstruction. And reconstruction is, for the first time, based on, if I remember it correctly, it's the first time that I'm finding it in this entire section. So, and it's very important to say this word to be used at some point. Reconstruction. So that's my only.
So where is that?
I would like to focus on our president's remarks. I agree that the highlighted section in handout 3 needs to be added, and I propose adding it to what I've just stated as some wording changes to what's on the screen. But I would like to add what's in highlighted to the end of A2 with one change. It's the word reconstruction. I think that word is out of context here, and it doesn't quite make sense. And as a lawyer interpreting it, I wouldn't know how to explain that to anybody. And I think the best way to deal with that is to end the sentence with the phrase, in reduced embodied carbon or minimized carbon. Because
I'm sorry, Brett.
I think without that phrase, that highlighted section makes makes sense, and it doesn't need the phrase starting with that would otherwise resulted from reconstruction, a phrase that I don't understand.
So I want to understand, the Secretary, you want incorporate more text from the handout 3, which is my draft,
Yes.
into A2.
That is correct.
Okay.
At the end of A2, I'd like to incorporate what is highlighted in handout 3, with the exception of the last phrase in the highlighted section. The last phrase, which says otherwise resulted from reconstruction, to me doesn't quite make sense.
I don't want to sidetrack too much, but the reason to otherwise from reconstruction is if we are building not designed to perform at certain resilient levels, such as after 2.5 earthquake, your building collapse, then is a significant amount of carbon you need to take down your damaged building and rebuilding another one. That is the context. But if you design your building as a resilience level of 6.5, then your building can survive 2.5. Reconstruction is not required. Therefore, the carbons associated with the reconstruction and new construction is omitted. Mm-hmm. That is the essence of resilient design, essence of life cycle approach.
Well, then let's remove that sentence and let's remove what's not clear to me and let's reword it to say what you just said, because I don't think the last phrase says what you just said.
Okay. Okay.
So in other words, stop at the word carbon?
And add something.
I didn't understand that either, about reconstruction and all that. Just
no,
got me so confused.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Would you like to?
Can I chime in and maybe offer something that might be helpful is, so we have our definitions in Section A, and just listening to the conversation, maybe it sounds like there might be a need to add a third definition addressing your concerns, member, for, what was the word?
Equitable.
Equitable. No, the first term was equitable, defining equitable in the reg, and
right.
And then there was one other term.
Resilient.
Resilient.
I think that there could be some value in actually adding those two definitions right into the regulation.
I think that's helpful. Thank you.
So instead of trying to keep adding to subparagraph A1 and A2, maybe think about, keeping those terms in there and then just clarifying them and defining in 3 and 4.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If I may just add to, I don't know what the point that I brought up about reconstruction, which direction it's taking, but if I'm, clarify this for me, please, if I'm wrong. Reconstruction refers to not new buildings. Is that what is meant? So for the entire document, we are talking about new buildings, but we haven't spoken a word about the existing buildings.
No, that's true. Definition 2, staff put clearly new construction and all existing facilities.
Yes. Yeah, so what I mean is that in here it's the only place that we are seeing this emphasized as to this whole issue, discussion about this whole issue does not apply to new buildings only. It also applies to the existing building as well. So that's why I'm insisting on using the word reconstruction or any term, any other word that applies to the existing building.
I think what we just heard from staff was a proposal that we use the word reconstruction, but that create a new section defining what we mean, defining the words. I'd like the word reconstruction defined in terms of resilience, and then I think to add an additional section defining the other word would be good too. Equitable. Thank you.
Equitable and resilient design.
Yeah, a new subsection saying what each means. Resilient shall mean, that's one subsection, and equitable shall mean. And we'll put the word reconstruction in the resilient definition that should be there. Okay? I think that explains it.
And you envision maybe A3 to incorporate some of additional information you want in terms of document structure. I try to manage the document as well.
Well, what I would do,
maybe A3.
if you don't mind me lawyering a bit, I would create under 2. I would create a subsection I and double I.
Yep.
I being the definition of equitable and double I being the definition of resilient.
Thank
Starting
you.
with the phrase, "This shall mean" in each of them.
Thank you for volunteering that. Waiting for your wording. And I like direct board's attention to the next topic. If you go to page 66, section C, that's where the topic staff listed as examples that meets the intent of zero net carbon design. It's a broad, it's structured a way that staff like. We had some input. Some of these, our input was incorporated. But I can live with staff's wording, and we can improve upon it. It is a key section. This is all the coursework we will accept that to meet that 5-hour requirement. So I want your input, and very soon we will open up to public too. So.
And I think Sunny wants to comment.
Okay, Sunny, you can go ahead.
Oh yeah, I'm unmuted. Okay. I want to just go back again and take you to, since we are indeed talking about handouts, let's go to go back to, this is handout 1, the one that's on the screen. Go back up to Article 10, 166.2, please, page before. The question was asked earlier of me what equitable meant, and I wanted to just wanted to let the board know the reason why that word made it in or was suggested by me after our committee meeting was I explained to you why it was important to me, but you know, and I understand the sort of broad nature of the word. But the definition is fair and just, you know, equitable means fair. And in our committee meeting, I was really concerned because there were some comments from the AIA that they didn't believe that social justice and climate justice should be part of, or it's what SB 10 was about. And so the word equitable was recommended as a suggestion by me in response to that, because I feel very differently, as I suggested sort of passionately earlier. And I also feel like the broadness of the definition of fair sort of meets the board's sort of push that we talked about in the previous qualification committee meetings about what other continuing education units could be. And so in category 2 of those 4 that we talked about earlier and other ideas about sustainability and discussions with legal and staff, that most every one of those sort of topics in that category 2 sort of fits into the glove of zero net carbon design, and that it's a broad topic. And so the word equitable for me was actually what you guys are all responding to as a, you know, like critically, that it is broad. And it was, and in sort of trying to come back with a new definition, which I had another definition that was completely different, just like Tian did. I wanted to respond to staff's definition based on like what I felt like we came away from the committee meeting. And that's where the word equitable came from. So I just wanted to come back to that and state that. In some of the other language that you're not seeing on the screen, I think the way that I had dealt with the word reconstruction was the word modification. And so that's another word that could be used instead of reconstruction, because again, it's more broad than reconstruction. And I think in this particular case, because there's so many things that could, become part of this discussion of zero net carbon design, it's not a bad thing to be broad right now. We have time on our side to narrow the scope as we learn more and also as we're legislated more by our government. So the broad aspect, although I get everyone's sort of concerned with it, for me, in this particular case, in both instances, was an asset.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm saying that, I'm trying to say this with all due respect to you, but I think you're preaching to the converted in a way here. You don't get a sense of what the sense I have sitting here, because you're not here, but I get the sense that, the board is well behind your intent and the word equitable or equitably.
This is the moderator. Can we get a microphone for this person, please?
Sorry, I'm going to repeat that. Nobody could hear me. I said with all due respect to you, you're not being here. I don't think you could feel what I feel in the room here among our board members is that you're preaching to the choir on what you just said. And my comment that we should create a definition of equitably and resilient under this section means I'd like to have your committee give us two definitions that we can insert. And I'd rather not us go into a lengthy, drafting session here. But I'm very interested in hearing what your committee and other board members would put in the definition of equitable as its own definition in subsection 2 sub I. I just don't feel we have the time to fully debate the wording, the wordsmithing here.
So Brett, I completely agree with you, and I do feel the support. I don't think there's anybody that I've met on the board or any conversation that's been had today that isn't on board with where we're going with this. But unfortunately, and I wasn't even responding to your comments about defining, because I'm all for more definitions. But as what I said is a response to the definitions, I guess if they were to be defined later, I would prefer a more broad definition as opposed to a narrow definition. Again, that may not be possible or feasible. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a legislator, but from where I'm coming at and from my perspective, I'm trying to get the point across that I want this to really open the horizon to have a broad, eclectic mix of zero net carbon design continuing education units. And so that's what I'm most sort of passionately after today. And then separately, I'm trying to respond to the staff definition as simply as possible, because we do really need to pass this today. We can't kick it down the road, and we can pass it today and change it later or modify it later. But I think the more simply we can sort of all come to an agreement, yay or nay, because we may have to kick it down the road, which gets a little complicated and puts us up against deadlines. But I think for everybody involved, it would behoove us to sort of get to a sort of clean, simple modification that we can make a motion on and approve, so that we can continue a healthy discussion in committee and then come back to you guys.
Okay. So well understood, Sonny, and I think we understand you and you believe that equitably is evidence itself. Anyone has a social consciousness, I guess. But I think we try to let the definition effort to go parallel with your feeling as well. And if you don't have a problem with the definition, we can just use the definition approach. I really want to direct board members' attention to next subject, which is the inclusiveness of the topic that we think it's qualified for meet the net zero carbon design. And I want to say that because we may have different opinion from industry. I just want to make sure you'd have an opportunity to take a look what the staff has written, and our vote will be one. This is one of the key elements that we want to vote on. I'd like to hear any oppositions or concerns, or we think we're missing something critical. I'll see.
Can we have the screen reflect subsection C?
Uh, 66.
No, on that right there, he's going up to there. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. Since you have an opportunity to look at it, I only have one suggestion to swap the two words. On the bottom third line, environmental resilience, we change to climate resilience, and then we move the environmental to environmental justice. Okay? It's a simple ask, swap them.
Can you repeat that?
Yes, the bottom third line, change environmental resilience to climate resilience. And the bottom second line, change climate justice to environmental justice.
Thank you.
It's hard to exhaustively list everything, but we have to have a starting point. And so I endorse staff's work. Let's start with this, and we can always perfect it in a later day.
Tim?
Yeah.
So, you know, for fear of forgetting something or omitting something, would it be possible to say, let's see, where was that section? In beginning the underline in the middle, examples of net zero carbon coursework topics or subjects may include any one or combination of the following. Is there a way to be more inclusive, or do you not want to be inclusive? You don't want to say, hey, and anything else you can think of, probably.
You're good point. Then it's harder to enforce. What about?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I don't know. I get your point.
But what if we forget something? We have forgotten something.
That's when we become exhaustive. Yeah.
I agree with
the word examples. Kind of opens that up. Examples. It's not an exhaustive list.
True.
Right. That's right. And I agree with that. And remember, this is a living document. So as we move through this, if we'd like to
examples.
If the committee would like to increase the examples, or the board would like to and propose that to the board, or the board would like to increase the examples, this list could become 3 or 4 times as long in the next 2 or 3 years, you know?
I mean, do you feel examples is inadequate, or should we say examples include, but not
Okay,
limited
that one
to?
I can speak to.
Yeah.
Because Office of Administrative Law has gotten very picky on including but not limited to, and including is inclusive, is expansive. The courts have ruled, if you simply say including, that doesn't mean that it's limited.
Yeah.
So now when we put in the phrase, it gets kicked back from the OLL attorneys.
Okay.
What about the use of the word may? I really like it. Is that going to be problematic?
Examples may include. I like that. Is that possible?
We like it. We're good with it, and I think that helps us.
Okay, so we have consensus, good. And again, I like to have board member pay attention. We also stipulate the qualities and the qualifications of a provider who can offer these classes of these subjects. And frequently we ask for these professionals with professional license. So my question to staff is, some of the subject matter may be covered by experts who are not licensed at traditional trades, like electrical engineer or mechanical engineer. Do you feel in your text you have not excluded the experts who are not licensed, who can offer classes and trainings?
Subsection F addresses the provider and education, the qualifications. Are you asking about that section where we list?
No,
those?
I ask, is any provisions you have precludes a non-licensed expert who is qualified to offer this class?
Well, subdivision F2 allows for non-licensed but having a faculty appointment at an accredited educational institution or an institution approved by BPPE, the Bureau for Private Post-Secondary Education.
Which page? Sorry.
Let's see. Are you asking for a page within the packet? I'm not working
Packet.
on the packet. It's subdivision F.
Okay.
This is the moderator. Could the people at the witness stand be very close to the microphone, please?
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
So subdivision F2 allows for individuals who are qualifying faculty members and would not have to hold the license or registration as an architect or a type of engineer. The other thing is that instructors providing courses can always bring in additional speakers to address new issues and new developments.
So, but that category is mostly towards the professional educators. They don't have to have license. I give you a scenario. If I'm an energy commissioner and I do not have any license, and my life is working on a net zero carbon or energy efficiency, and am I qualified to offer class?
Well, can I add to it? Yeah.
Yes, Mitra.
Can we just suffice with saying non-licensed professionals and educators, current educators and professionals? Because that is something that, in fact, incorporates, basically what is being mentioned in here about a minimum of 3 projects. How in the world 3 is sacred about this issue? Where does the 3 justifies the expertise of the individual?
Karen, can you live with that? Non-licensed professionals, they're kind of qualifying.
Right? That opens it up to anyone who's unlicensed and is a professional. What does that mean?
No, what I'm saying is here, I'm questioning mainly the 3 projects. So what is it that makes the 3 projects bring qualification for that individual? Why not 2? Why not 5?
If the board says today, we think it has to be 5, then it's 5. We have to put a number in. We have to put a standard. And the point for the board is go through and decide, are these standards working? Does this work? So I'm hoping to hear something that we can use to justify this number. And if there's a better number, great, because we have to explain and justify every word in the text.
My point is that we should avoid the number. But we have to. Does this mean we have to?
Well, then how do you establish expertise in the area sufficient to teach?
Okay. I like to do some slightly different. For the next 3 agenda, according to this one, we will have some dialogues with our participating audience, and they are largely, many of them are experts themselves. And I will put a challenge on our public members here today. For example, I see a staff from Division of State Architects, Eric, I believe your name. And how if I invite you as a public speaker, what's your view about licensed requirement? You need to speak to the phone, sorry.
Do you want to finish board member comment before you open it to public comment?
No, I like to hear some comments to facilitate our discussions. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you, President Fang and board members. My name is Eric Drever, Principal Architect over Architectural Codes and Policies at Division of the State Architect. Really value the opportunity to speak to you today. There's a broad number of topics on the table right now, and so I'll speak specifically to the question that was asked. And I would point out that accurately, many regulatory agencies, and that's what I would focus on in terms of another expertise, many regulatory agencies employ engineers, which through California Human Resources is defined as not requiring a license. Mechanical engineers and electrical engineers as such do not require to hold a license, nor might they have ever necessarily worked on a project. They are lifelong regulators and promulgators of code, and certainly have expertise, but have never worked on a project. So I think in the first section, by requiring one to work on a project and all the other subsequent requirements, you're excluding the potential for a regulatory employee to provide training. We ourselves at DSA provide training on California green standards, building standards. We employ engineers who are not licensed. Therefore, any of our training would be excluded from being provided or included in the continuing education credits.
Okay. Thank you for sharing, Eric. Yeah, and other public members we will open public forum again, so you will have a voice. I just thought some of the perspective from relevant agency may help us speed up the discussion. Thank you again.
You're welcome. We do have proposed language, although it's simply a proposed language, if you're interested in hearing.
Let's call upon you when. Thank you again, Eric. Yeah. So I personally don't feel. I know in my work, many professions, cost engineer, environmental engineer, and electronic engineers, they do not even have a state-recognized license. So excluding them from potential offering their expertise in the subject, I don't know how this might be actually benefit our consumers, because we have a far narrower pool of qualified candidates. So I personally will open up to an idea of not too restrictive of everyone has to be licensed. But I want to hear fellow board members' opinion on that.
I guess I do have a question. Is it fair to say that this language really was a result of a comment during our last board meeting in which we challenged the initial thought process that the burden was on the licensee to find credible trainers? And so this language is designed to basically identify, to create qualifications for the trainers themselves?
So you're talking about how we talked about potentially approving providers, right? But we don't, so we're setting the standards. Yeah, so the regulation we have to pick people that are qualified to teach it, right? There has to be a cutoff point. Yeah, so it's clear to licensees who they can go to and to providers who can offer it. So it has to be clear in the regulation who is qualified to provide the training, so that licensees know who they can go to, and so then providers know who they can use for the training. We're not approving providers or courses, but it has to be clear, and we have to have a standard that's easy to understand. Certainly the board can modify this language, we need something defensible as to who can teach this.
Well, I heard from Erica speaking as a member of the public that you know, we shouldn't exclude engineers. And I heard from
They're not excluded, they're in here.
and I heard from the president that maybe we should limit engineers because there are so many like software engineers who wouldn't be qualified. So I would like to suggest that we keep in the word engineers, but we talk about engineers with experience in construction or something
Here's
like.
what the language says right now.
Yeah.
Hold a license or registration issued by a United States jurisdiction as an architect or professional, civil, mechanical, or structural engineer with a minimum of 5 recent projects or 3 years of demonstrable direct experience.
Yeah.
That's going to exempt out the other types of engineers.
No, this is just to give an example of has to have a license, right? Holds a license or registration.
Yes, engineers need to be licensed.
Well, what I just heard is that not all engineers have licenses, and that we should keep that in mind. And with that in mind, I just proposed that we talk about engineers without license, but who have experience in the means and methods of construction. And that's what I heard from Eric. Would be a good direction.
Well, I would have to check the Engineers Practice Act, but I assume that they're like architects, right? You can't be an engineer in California if you're not licensed, just like you can't be an architect in California if you're not licensed. It's not a Title Act.
We're going to open this up to the public, but I'd like to hear the public opinion on what Laura just said. I may have heard state architecture department saying something different, so I'd like to hear some more on that.
So I think my request for the board members, given some of the license, some of the professions, or some of the engineers, they do not, for example, industrial engineer, I don't think there's a state level license. Do we need to put the language as specific as F1? It holds that no exception, holds a license or registration issued by, so that is the question to the board member. I know for fact that there are professionals who are not holding a license, who are experts in some field of, energy related and other things. But again, that's board's decision, and we'll have the benefit of public members weighing in and a similar regulatory body weigh in. So this is the opportunity we want to manage this process and have some kind of consensus.
So
I
think
comment. Oh.
Is the objective here, you're trying to establish a threshold for qualification.
That's right.
Credentialed or not. But it's akin to me to the idea that under the accessibility continuing education requirement, a non-licensed architect can teach that course.
Right, you can.
And so the question is, if we are saying that, and we don't have those same standards for accessibility continuing education.
I hope it's not on the licensing part.
Right, we're proposing it, but it's currently not on the books, right? And so we're doing here setting a precedent, and I think that we want to be careful because I heard two things, and I really appreciate the gentleman from the California State Office of Architecture is that because you have career professionals who have never been involved in the design construction of projects. And so I think the idea of saying that you have to work on projects, that's a legitimate argument against that requirement. But I think that suggesting that there's no credentialed qualifications, I think is a slippery slope. Because then how do we then define the level, what's the threshold? And I think we're just trying to establish that. And I think some level of training, certification, credentials have to be in place.
So that's why we need this discussion. Is on accessibility, we know the certified access specialist does not require other disciplines license, right? Is that the case, Eric? So in other words, you are expert, but you're not a licensed engineering architect to be profession.
Right.
Jen?
Disability access package, they're recognized because they're tasked. But I think we have this location. Oh, maybe Robert or Sunny want to speak?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Robert.
First, this is not the full employment for people to put on classes act we're talking about here. So that should be secondary. The question is whether the definitions grant us a sufficient pool of instructors that the architecture committee can find reasonably priced people to do it. So I'm not an expert in that, but if we determine that the universe of these licensed people plus faculty members, plus we have these other three categories of certified plan examiners, building inspectors, plans examiners, presumably they can keep that certificate even if they've retired. Would that give a sufficient pool of people to teach the courses? I think if the answer is yes, then I agree with Ron. We don't need to go into the field of other unlicensed people at this point. And as Sonny said, it's still a work in progress, a moving target. If we find we've missed the target, we can fix that later. So I think we should leave it as is. The language is still a bit inartfully drafted. For example, the requirement in F is that you have a minimum of 3 projects. Well, Eric said worked on. It actually doesn't say worked on, strangely enough. I guess that's implied, but it says with a minimum of 3 projects within the last 10 years. But then those who are licensed have to have 5 projects in the last or 3 years. It's kind of strange comparison. And then how does a faculty member work on a project? If they've been faculty the whole time, what does that mean that they supposedly worked on 3 projects? So that seems very confusing to me as well.
At least,
so
at least one of those categories.
I got a real problem with the language, and F maybe doesn't work with the subcategories. If you're appointed at an accredited institution and you're directly responsible for teaching, carbon reduction, et cetera, I mean, is that enough? So we don't have to say you worked on 3 projects. Also, the definition or reference in F to high performance buildings, I don't know what that means, but if you architects say it's sufficiently clear, I'll leave that alone. Thank you.
Sunny, did you want to talk to Sunny?
No, I'm good. I agree with a lot of what Robert just said.
Okay. So do we need more conversation? This is one of the area I hope a board member, when you vote, you weigh heavily, and so that's my perspective. 3 key elements of this agenda item is the definition will support all our work. 2 is the topics we will accept as a net zero carbon, and the 3rd is who can provide that education. So. And the staff would prefer, I notice, and it's beyond, but if we can take action, actually vote on this with some modifications, we can move on, will be ideal. I don't know if we are so close or not. Looks like not. So. Oh, really? Okay.
Well, Robert just suggested a half a dozen changes, and I'd like to see at least his changes incorporated, and some of the others I've heard in the last couple of minutes before we vote. Robert's were particularly astute, I thought.
Would Robert be able to articulate those items in such a way that they can be incorporated now?
Well, I guess one way to look at it is, do we have to say the minimum of 3 projects in the last 10 years? Do people feel that's essential? Or could you delete that and just go with 5 recent projects of 3 years into subpart 1 and be a qualified faculty appointment responsible for teaching, carbon reduction, et cetera, without any reference to number of years, anything of that nature? And lastly, could you add into category 3 about the certification from these ICC programs, something that relates to 5 recent projects, for example, of 3 years of working with carbon neutral design, something like subpart 1. So if we could strike the minimum of 3 projects within the last 10 years, and then add the 5 recent projects of 3 years to subpart 3, and just trust the category 2 is sufficient, that they're qualified by being a faculty member directly responsible, would that be sufficient and satisfactory?
May I piggyback on that as well? I just want to add one more thing. I want to, and again, not to blow up the conversation, but category 3 International Code Council, the world is definitely heading toward zero carbon, but I'm not sure that it's the International Code Council's priority. So how are we to know that A, B, A, C, or D, the letters seem off there, by the way, we're missing, it's A, B, C, or maybe it should be, there's a mistake. Should category 3 be removed for now, completely? Like what's the evidence that anybody in this category has the education specifically, narrowly for zero net carbon design?
So I guess my question, and I was just having a bigger conversation, unless our language is fundamentally flawed, I was asking whether or not, as a matter of process, we could basically move this along, allow public comment, and during that process, continue to work internally. And then once we get public comment back, combine the two for the final draft document. I think that it appears as though there's still work to be done. And I think that there's still an opportunity to make internal modifications while we're looking for public comment as well. So it's a question as much as it is a statement, and if it's possible, and if that's reasonable, then I suggest that we consider that as an exercise or a matter of course.
Actually, Ken, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Has the AIACC provided all the input that we need or want on this document? Have we asked them? What's the...
Yeah, we're going to went through the process.
We did?
And you will hear from them, and they are here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, they're here. Okay. Good. I'd like to hear, what they have to say as well.
Our original goal was try to move the agenda forward and leave some of the non-substance editorial work to staff. Looks like we're getting more and more disagreement on uncertainty. So Laura is open to maybe we table it, but at the same time staff will continue working on the document and continue to soliciting more public input. Maybe my question to the board is this: what do you think? We table it. No. My boss has different opinions, so just take my word back.
Defer to what Karen says is possible, but my concern is if we defer to the next meeting, even if we make changes, we're gonna end up doing this at the next meeting as well. So what I would suggest, if it's possible, is that the board approve a set of language today, within the packet or the handout 1 or 2, and then we are initiating the rulemaking process, which starts us going on the very long process to meet our statutory deadline of having these regs in place. And then we're going to get public comment in, I am certain, and we'll have to have some changes to the language to address the comments we receive. And staff can, at the same time, be working on the comments that board members have made here, to see what additional changes we might propose, and there would be modified language that would also go out, again, so the board would we would receive comments in, staff would potentially recommend changes to language to address the comments, to address comments made here, and then it would have to come back to the board for another vote if there's any modifications to the language. Am I summarizing that right, Karen? And is that doable?
That's doable, and if there's a statutory deadline involved, then that will move things forward. We have the recording of this meeting to try to make changes, and it comes back before the board with things struck out and underlined. But if there are some changes that you think you can get clearly in the record and vote for that, because this meeting doesn't work with, I put down every little bit of your amendment that was never brought up as an amendment, voted, moved forward or not. So there's a lot of discussion that didn't get formalized. And to do a vote, you might have to agree on some specific changes, or just go with this and have staff come from what was suggested here and make changes and bring it to the board. So it can be done, and it's a way of moving the process forward.
So see if I can change the way of saying it. So you are okay, you two are okay, if the board can vote on some of highlighted changes as a motion not attached to any specific paragraph, high level. So the board want strike the license requirement. The board want define the definition of package 3 and the staff, and the board wants whatever that, or boards approve all the topics listed as example, and then is that okay?
If you can get it fairly clear in the record, then we can take that
maybe that's
and send it
doable.
for public comment. But I need to be able to prove to the OAL people who, the Office of Administrative Law attorneys who review this, that is what the board voted on, so that the document we come out of is the board's intention and the language. So yes, you could go through it and say, this document with this change, one, that we use the language that Mr. Gladstone had said about this, or, you know, putting in a whole new definition for two things. I think you can't get that done at this meeting. It would be something moving forward. But your switch of moving around the language between climate justice and you know, you had a very simple switch that could be this language and this simple switch. This language, and what was suggested about the providers, it would be very simple to take out the language you talked about in F, to just say striking from the word design to the word and meet, and then in the first subsection, combine holding a license and registration or holding a current unexpired certification from the ICC, and both groups have it. It has to be clear. That's the problem.
I would propose we have a motion highlights what the board wants and the staff work into the details. But what you're suggesting, go back to provision again to make insertional change. That is quite a bit of work. Can we?
So I think, yeah. So anyway,
This is the moderator.
You can't.
Hey, West Hollywood speak. I feel like on our end, we could get there very, very cleanly, quickly, and clearly. I retract my comment about opposition to category 3. Let's leave it in for now. In the future, we can deal with that. So I'd like to retract that if everyone else is on board with that. And I think Robert has some maybe simple to respond to legal's conversation right now. I think he has some simple things that he could provide. And then I think back to the original discussion, I think we were all very close and could get there. So from our end, I feel like we're feeling positive about getting this done.
We can't leave any writing for staff to do.
That's right.
I
feel like we can do it simply and cleanly with what's been handed to us, with the knowledge that in the future this will be a continuing conversation. But I think we can get there and get it passed today.
Can I try then? I think we are okay with the C, topic of education. We want expanding the definition of 2. Is it possible, Brad, you can actually come up with some language? Is it 2, right?
You're talking about
yeah.
A2.
A2, yeah. And then we have not formed a unified opinion. I don't know if we want to vote on the. I think I heard the license is required, it's important, but actual project experience maybe can be omitted. Is that something I get?
Well, I would suggest some language on F, but first I had a question, if I could, Chen.
Yeah.
Under F1, it talks about a minimum of 5 recent projects or 3 years, etc. What does the staff intend recent to refer to in that context? That's rather vague.
That's one of those that they have to justify in the statement of reasons, and you're hoping to hear from the board something that you can use to justify it. Would that be within the last 20 years, the last 10 years? How many projects? are done. And I don't know the amount of work people do and how many different projects are carried in a standard year workload.
So I want staff aware of that net zero carbon is not very well defined industry practice. It's our aspiration, not common practice. So there's no building code to teach us step by step. So be aware of that, and by asking some more general qualifications, we maybe preclude a significant amount good instructors has real life experience that's pertinent to net zero carbon, but they does not have this conventional qualification. So there is a potential for that as well.
Okay, and the board can strike, and just say, and that's clear on the record, striking is always clear. We go to
So let me suggest F while maybe Brad works on A2 or whatever. Let me suggest how F might be changed so that we would strike a minimum of 3 projects within the last 10 years. Okay.
So are you going to do now, or you will write something and email us?
I'm stating it now. Yeah, I'm trying to state it now, so that and so we can take notes and then we can refine it later. But the idea would be that we would simply say carbon design or zero net carbon bazilling in the designing of carbon neutral and higher performance buildings. So strike the minimum 3 projects in the last 10 years. In item 1, we'd strike 5 recent projects to say minimum of 3 years of demonstrable direct experience. And then item 3, we would parrot the language that's going to be in 1, which says with a minimum of 3 years of demonstrable direct experience in the designing, examining, or inspection of carbon neutral and or high performance buildings and structures. So repeat the language in sub 1, but just refer to the whole category of not just design, but examining and inspecting as part of category 3.
I have no problem. I don't know if staff actually can hear you loud and clear. If they noted it. Karen, are you okay? Note this.
Yes, subdivision 4, starting from the term carbon building design, you're striking the words with a minimum of 3 projects within the last 10 years. Then you end striking, and the rest of the sentence continues.
You said 4. You mean F, don't you?
F. Thank you. So that's just for F.
Okay.
Then for 1, again, to strike in the second sentence after the word structural engineer with a, then we begin striking minimum of 5 recent projects. Oh, so you take out a.
So you leave minimum, so you strike or you strike of 5 recent projects, minimum of 3 years. It'll read minimum of 3 years.
Minimum of 3 years of demonstrable direct experience.
That's right.
In the designing of carbon neutral and high performance buildings or groups of buildings and structures. And then under F, subdivision 3.
Microphone, please.
Under F, subdivision 3, after, correct the lettering, and after the 3 types of current unexpired certifications allowed, have a minimum of 3 years of demonstrable direct experience in the designing, managing, and inspection of carbon neutral and or high performance buildings or groups of buildings and structures.
But not managing, the term will be examining, since that's one of the categories in 3.
So examining and inspecting.
Or inspecting, right. Right.
So Karen, we need your help when we make a motion. You have to read the whole thing. Okay, help us. And then now we ask.
Tian, may I speak up about 2 before we talk about it again? I really would like to go back to where I was earlier in the day, where the one that's in our packet, item number 2, we simply strike the word annually at the end of 2, and we add, again, I'm going to try again, to add the word equitably procures. And then if we strike the word annually, that in essence opens it up to the entire life cycle of a building.
Sonny, this is next that the Secretary Gladstone is drafting, and he will do similar thing, similar to what the Roberts did, and share the language with us. Our definition. Do you want more time, or you can start?
I need a little more time.
Oh, you need more time. Okay. So, Karen, we don't have change on the topics of education, and
Can we just
yeah,
take a short break in a minute while he drafts, perhaps, like a little nature break?
Okay, we take 5 minutes break, but just so you know, my goal was 1 hour per agenda item. We are 15 minutes over, so. Okay. Okay,
Mr.
5
President.
minutes break. Coming back 1:55. Thank you.
Mr. President, in addition to when we return from break, we do have a member of the public who has been waiting very patiently for public comment.
They will be invited. They will.
And we also have a request for someone to repeat Eric's name and title.